Dear Mr. Scarfe, for years your ugly and horrific caricatures have disturbed me. While I appreciate the fact that you must have talent to arouse one to this extent, I also object to being subjected to the horrors of your mind while reading a paper of my choice. Today I can no longer contain myself. I cannot send you a drawing to upset you, but I can tell you how sorry I feel for you. I can simply tear up the paper, but you have to live with your warped images forever. Poor you. Yours sincerely, L.G. Sachs.
Good evening. The BBC have asked me to write and direct a programme about myself. It's no easy task because I don't know exactly who I am. I'm going to present myself as a blank canvas and try and sketch in the details which make up my portrait. People see me as some kind of monster, but as you can see, I'm a perfectly ordinary sort of chap. First and foremost, I'm an artist. And art is the expression and flowering of the spirit. It's a gift handed down from the gods on Olympus to us mere mortals below.
Bollocks! What a load of old cobblers!
Get out! You're embarrassing me.
Bollocks!
As I was saying, it's a precious gift, and one that must not be abused. This is the moment I hate the most and love the most, because it's the moment I've got to commit a mark on this empty canvas here, and that mark will define the rest of the painting. The idea's in my head, but I'm never quite sure what's going to come out on the paper or the canvas. I feel that I present a bland mask to the world. A smiling mask. One that doesn't want to offend anybody, really. And the other side of me, the artistic side, the side that this side is ashamed of, we'll put here. This is the side that offends everybody. Attacks everybody. And appears to have no feelings for anybody. Meanwhile, the mask smiles on and looks slightly embarrassed. Beneath the darker side of my figure, in the pit below, are leaping demons that I fear, these nameless things that I can't quite put my finger on. Teeth dripping blood. Well, that's as I see myself now. But to begin at the beginning, I was born in St. John's Wood in London in 1936. My mother was from Radnorshire and had been a school teacher before her marriage. My father, a Londoner, spent all his civilian life in banking. From the age of 1, I suffered with chronic asthma. We were living in London when the air raid started. The bombs began to fall, and we sat in the cellar. I was frightened of the wolf I knew was hiding down there, and I was frightened of the claustrophobic Mickey Mouse gas mask I sometimes had to wear.
The mouse ran down, hickory dickory dock. Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock.
Hickory dickory dock, the mouse ran out the clock. The clock struck one, the mouse ran down. Hickory dickory dock.
My father joined the RAF and was posted to Shaftesbury within a year, and my mother and I followed to the comparative safety and bliss of the Dorset countryside. I have memories of walking with my mother down golden brown country lanes in the autumn sunshine, collecting acorns for pigs as part of the war effort, and eating dried eggs and dried bananas. My mother saved me all the family butter ration to build me up. I hated it. I preferred margarine.
Mr. Ernest, you do look funny this morning. Your eyes are all goggly.
Oh, you look goggly, Larry, my lad, if you could see what I see. I wonder my eyes don't pop right out.
That reminds me, did you know that if you hold a guinea pig up by its tail, its eyes will drop out? My friend Dennis told me last night. Isn't it curious?
My father was posted to Penarth. I suffered from terrible asthma and had to go to hospital. There'll be lots of toys, coaxed my parents. Every day at a particular time, they would walk across the fields to wave to me from behind the wire fence. Misery. Thereafter followed a succession of schools as we moved around the country. My parents put me into the nearest one regardless of quality so that, should I get an asthma attack, they were near at hand. I was ashamed of my illness because it made me feel different. During mild attacks, I tried to pretend that I was breathing normally. Any friends that I made lost interest because I was never at school, and they all found it too boring to visit a friend who was bedridden. I'd always been good at drawing, and so in my isolation I took to it more and more, and it became my method of communication with the world. I could spend hours engrossed in a drawing and not notice the time pass by. Hospital was frightening. Visiting hours were short. The cleaning lady was a witch. I had to humor her. The man in the bed opposite threw me a slab of toffee because I was crying. It missed the bed and slid into the fluff underneath. The witch gave it to me. I smiled at her. As a child, I suffered from the most horrific nightmares. I used to strike out in my sleep at anyone within distance. And one recurring dream came night after night, and that was my hands seemed to grow larger and larger like giant balloons. I couldn't stand it.
As an asthmatic child, there was nothing for me to do in bed except draw, make models out of plasticine, make little puppets, theaters. And drawing, I think, became my way of expressing my fears about all of it. I spent a lot of time in hospital and saw people dying there and was surrounded by death from a very early age. And I think putting all these down on paper helped me to explain it to myself. So I always drew. I always drew from a very early age, but I never knew that it would be useful to me. My parents, who didn't understand art, thought that it wasn't a proper way of life at all, thought that I should go into banking or something like that. So there was always a sort of tearing within me. I never, and still don't quite know, whether I'm an artist or a banker somewhere deep inside me.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, the greatest character in show business, Mr. Mickey Mouse.
Hi, Fuzz.
As a child, I loved Walt Disney. My biggest influence was Mickey Mouse. I remember a teacher at school saying to me, "I don't know what's the matter with you, Scarfe. You're always drawing disasters." I was always drawing ships going down at sea, trains crashing, natives uprising, and volcanoes erupting. I had so many illnesses and I was away from school so often that when I got back, I frequently found they'd started some subject, like algebra, and I had no idea what they were talking about. 0 out of 10. See me.
La mer qu'on voit danser le long des golfes clairs a des reflets d'argent, la mer.
At the age of 16, I was sent to the French spa town of La Boubou in Auvergne. The water there had arsenic qualities and was supposed to be good for asthmatics.
Au ciel d'été confond ces blancs moutons.
Votre asthme a abîmé vos poumons. Et puis vous avez un cœur très fragile. Alors, il vous faut faire attention. Ôtez votre chemise. Asseyez-vous.
In a dark consulting room, behind heavy net curtains, an enormously fat and pompous French doctor sat me on a stool. He put the fear of God into me by telling me that I had a weak heart, that I needed cupping, and that on no account should I go out into the sunlight.
Vous devrez vous soigner toujours. Il vous est absolument défendu de vous promener en plein soleil. Mettez-vous là.
Cupping was the almost medieval French custom of burning the air out of glass jars and placing them on the skin. The flame burns out the oxygen and draws the flesh up into the jar.
La mer qu'on voit danser le long des golfes clairs a des reflets d'argent, la mer, des reflets changeants sous la pluie. La mer au ciel d'été confond ses blancs moutons avec les anges si purs. La mer, bergère d'azur infinie. Voyez, près des étangs, des grands roseaux mouillés. Voyez.
So there I lay, glass jars all over my back, mounds of red flesh sucked up in them. Didn't do me any good at all. Doctor had said, don't go out in the sun. What did I do? Straight back to the hotel, lay on the balcony, in the sun.
The thought of being far away from home released something in me, and I'm ashamed to say I robbed a small shop of some cakes.
When I left school, my parents wanted me to go into banking, so I went for the medical. Luckily, I failed it. Must be the only person to fail a medical for a bank. All that was left open to me then was art. So, I started the long climb up the ladder of success.
There was one other artist in the family, an uncle who ran an advertising studio at the Elephant and Castle in South London. He took me on, and I started work there. It was an old Dickensian building, and my first chore in the morning was to clean the artist's water pots, sweep the floor, make the morning tea, and to further my talent, make up the fire. As time went on, I proved I could draw. Before long, I was tackling the studio's most prestigious accounts. My work rose to a pinnacle of pathetic perfection. It was about this time that Andy Warhol's Campbell's soup cans became famous. But I'm afraid my Robertson's marmalade pot fell into obscurity. However, the gollywog came in handy later. I used him to frighten Enoch.
I loathed it here. It seemed to me the whole point of being an artist was to tell the truth. Here I was telling lies all day long. I was dealing with tatty old bits of flannel like this and trying to pretend that they were wonderful, fluffy, luxurious, comfortable blankets. My only escape, really, I suppose at the time, was humor. And I went to Punch magazine. And Punch magazine became my sort of be-all and end-all. And there was one man in Punch magazine, Ronald Searle, that I really admired. And I wrote to Ronald Searle many times because I thought he was perhaps the only man who could get me out of this. I didn't know where else to go, or how to get out of it. But I thought perhaps he could help me. So I wrote to him, but I never dared send the letters. In fact, I went to his house once or twice, and I thought I'd ring the doorbell, but I never dared. I cycled around in the road outside and went home again without having seen him.
I started to draw cartoons of my own, and soon I was selling 5 or 6 a week to the Evening Standard. Then, in 1960, one of them was accepted by Punch. Once a week, I would gather with a group of other cartoonists in the Hampstead Coffee Bar for an ideas session, a kind of lukewarm bohemia. We would sit over cups of espresso discussing desert islands, mothers-in-law, burglars with swag, policemen with trousers down, hypnotists, and drunks with lampposts.
But I grew tired of Mr. Punch and his desert islands, his banana skins. And the darker side of my nature began to take over in the drawings.
I wonder if this boils down, in fact, to what Lord Denning pointed out, that there is no machinery for reporting the moral misbehavior of ministers. Do you think there should be?
No. I've been in public life now for about 40 years. From time to time we've had these sort of problems arise. But there's no machinery, alas, for finding out whether a man is truthful or tells a lie, except common sense. But what did seem to be, I'll be frank, almost incredible that a man whose record was, as far as I knew, good, war, peace, served a long time in the House of Commons, should commit the only absolutely unforgivable House of Commons fault, to tell them a lie, and then actually to go to law and bring an action on what amounted to a false statement. I'm bound to say when he did, the House of Commons statement and brought the action, I felt that any doubts I might have had were completely gone, because nobody could be not only so wrong and wicked, but such a fool as to do such a thing.
I made a drawing of Macmillan on a chair similar to the one that Christine Keeler was photographed on. And it was a drawing that seemed to gain a lot of attention from people. People at the time accused me of having an obsession with pubic hair and orifices, breasts. Quite unwarranted, I felt at the time. Rather childish. Still, I've got it out of my system now. It was amongst the sex shops and strippers of Soho that I found my release. Private Eye was born above a betting shop in Greek Street. It was just what I was looking for. They let me draw what I liked and how I liked. 4 raging satirists on the way to the pub. Then we looked dangerous.
As Mary Quant was to the miniskirt and the underwear, you were to cartoons. You were sort of the 60s cartoonist, you know, and they were all looking for somebody. The 60s this, the 60s that, you know.
Yeah. Well, I associate all that time, and you particularly, with this business of the Perfumer affair, and also with Claude Coburn coming over to the Eye. And he did that guest issue in the summer of 1963. And his view of the political scene was very different to mine, or to ours, I think, because we were certainly a bit sort of starry-eyed about everything. And the combination of Claude and the Perfumer and all the corruption that was revealed then altered my view of the political scene completely.
I mean, I think that era was coincidentally particularly good for a magazine to
you never had
flourish in.
Things were 12 years of Tory rule, everything happy, everything fine.
And there was this great sort of Macmillan establishment, wasn't there, of all his relatives in the cabinet.
Yes,
people like Henry Brooke. And I mean, people talk about the establishment now, and you can't really say, well, who is the establishment? But then you could actually show that there was a sort of establishment. Most of them had all been at Eton together. And you were the only person who would do something that was really sort of savage about Macmillan and all those judges.
Did you ever feel that I went too far?
Well, there was one occasion when we had this cartoon of Wilson licking. The idea was that Wilson would be shown licking LBJ's bum at the time. This was at the time of the Vietnam War, and I can't remember what the bubble was.
I've heard about a special relationship, but this is ridiculous.
That's right. But I think in your original version, we actually saw the naked bum of LBJ, Wislon's tongue intruding into it. And I found this slightly offensive, I think. And in the second version, Wilson was sort of trying to pull down his trousers, which probably actually looked amazing. I think it's probably better in here.
So there are occasions, really, then, when you feel that things can go too far?
Yes. I mean, I wouldn't put it like that. I would say, well, maybe it's more effective done this way, or you alienate people by being over-offensive on certain occasions. You did a very good drawing of Churchill, didn't you, in the House of Commons? Nobody would use that.
Yeah, I remember I went to draw Winston Churchill during his last days, and no one had realised that he wasn't the great bulldog figure that we'd all seen in the newspapers. And it was a bit of a shock, I think, to everyone to see that he was slightly senile at the time. And the reason the Times wouldn't print it was that they said that they couldn't stand the thought of Clemmy going and finding it in the letterbox in the morning, his wife. So it wasn't printed because of her. But then you had no such compunction about it, did you?
He was post-senile.
Well, it's all very well. I wonder how Gerald will feel when he's about 98, so unable to get a pencil in his hand, let alone anything into his mouth.
Use of pulleys.
Young lads come round drawing him live. Oh, look, there's Scarfe. Let's do a drawing of it. Oh, he's wobbling too quickly. He's all a blur.
I think you had a fly on Churchill's face, didn't you? My recollection.
No, while I was drawing him, there was a fly crawling all over his head.
Well, it's nice to know he attracted that sort of loyalty.
Perhaps you'd like to do a drawing of Macmillan, Gerald, this very, very old man, all these corpses coming back to torment him.
Yeah. This awful young Tory chap has been saying things about his 40,000 people sent back to certain death. Best decision I ever made. Very proud of it. Very proud. Best of men. Yes, son of all.
They were all Germans.
Oh, yeah, were they? Oh, I thought they were our people. Awful little yobs. Miners. Miners, I think they were. Yes. Made some hard...
Don't talk any higher, I'll start to cool down. Oh.
I don't think that... I don't think humanity does disgust me, no. But I can't explain why the drawings give that view. Maybe it does, and I don't know it. I think some of it can be explained by the fact that I felt such a lack of drawing education that I taught myself anatomy. I bought doctors' reference books showing various parts of the body and the muscles and the veins. And I made my drawings, certainly in my earlier days, attempting to put muscles and bones in. It was just trying to get the drawing right. But beyond that, there was a kind of a relish in what I did. I enjoyed drawing it. I enjoyed drawing distended stomachs and rib cages. It was the construction of us all. I think it's the way we're all made, and it points out our frailty. It points out we're just here, no one knows why or what we're doing, and we just sort of grow up as these lumps of flesh go through these social whirls and out the other end.
In 1965, the Daily Express ran a large article on me. "Just you wait," said a Fleet Street friend. "They'll start to buy you up now." Sure enough, the Daily Express editor rang. "Would I like to come to lunch on Thursday?" "Wonderful. Yes, please," I said. The next day, the Daily Mail rang. "Would I like to come to lunch on Tuesday?" "Wonderful. Yes, please." Now, I thought, being young and zealous, I'm determined to go to these meetings and make clear that I will not work for them without complete assurance of my political freedom. Yes, absolutely. Vere Harmsworth, the owner of the Mail, took me for a slap-up lunch at the Caprice. "Now remind me, Gerald, what have we offered you?" he said, pouring me another glass of wine. 5,000 a year and a Rover 2000, I said. "Nonsense," said Harmsworth. "You shall have 6,000 a year and an E-Type. Have a short life and a merry one, ha!" "It's not really the issue," I said lamely. I've already got a car." I tried to explain about the political freedom I'd hoped for, but he was already paying the bill. I first went to America in 1964 for the Johnson-Goldwater election. I loved it. I returned to America time and time again. It fascinated me like a great glittering snake. I drew everything American I could think of. I'd never seen such excess, violence, rudeness, inhumanity, such vulgarity and energy, such riches, such poverty, and such a voracious appetite for getting to the top of the heap.
It's super, Dad!
It produced a whole batch of drawings from me and inspired my first animated film.
stream.
When you wish upon a star, makes no difference who you are. Anything your heart desires will come to you. If your heart is in your room, no request is too extreme. When you wish upon a star, as dreamers do.
The Daily Mail decided that as I was a brutal artist, they should send me to a brutal situation, the war in Vietnam. They didn't understand that the brutality in my drawings comes from the things that I fear, not from things that I advocate. I hate violence. Until my visit, Vietnam was a name on a map or a film of Marines jumping out of a helicopter on the television news. I felt sympathy, but I only saw it symbolically and made symbolic drawings. The reality was far different. Vietnam was a beautiful country with gentle people who, like most civilians in wartime, were confused and frightened. They didn't want to die, and they didn't want a war. And I also realized for the first time that apart from the tough professionals, most of the soldiers didn't want one either. Most of them seemed to be young college kids hoiked out of their studies, flown to some strange jungle, given guns and told to go out and kill gooks, as they contemptuously called the Vietnamese. I arrived at a camp in the jungle. Everything was in disarray. I was told by a tough sergeant that the previous day one of their platoons had been surrounded by the Viet Cong. They had radioed for help and were told that an airstrike would be carried out if they gave their precise position. The surrounded soldiers radioed that they were pinned down in a circle about a quarter of a mile wide. The pilot misheard the instructions and dropped napalm inside the circle, killing and maiming his own men. As the sergeant told me this story, a few bewildered survivors of the disaster were still wandering back. Others had deserted. Rain splattered off the tin roof as I made this drawing of one of the young soldiers, who sat silently on his bunk next to the boots and rifle of his dead buddy. And it had never struck me before that when anybody dies in war, that they don't fall over in one piece like John Wayne. And the whole morgue was full of bits of bodies, torsos, legs, half bodies, and for the first time in my life, I just could not draw what I saw. It had been perfectly all right for me to make these things up symbolically and draw them from my imagination, but when I saw the reality of this carnage, I just could not put my pencil on the paper.
I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you. Lord knows I love you anyhow. And I don't care if you don't want me, because I'm yours anyhow. I put a spell on you.
If people think that I'm an unpleasant character, maybe I am. It is a strange and nasty job that I do. And it does deal with the black side of life, and it does deal with pessimism. It doesn't mean that I'm not a romantic. I am a romantic. And it's the distance between the romance that I want to see and the reality that I know is there that I'm drawing all the time. It's that gap. There's this side of me that has to, or has been forced into being honest about mankind, about people, about all of us, and the other side that socially wants to be accepted. The drawings that I do are done in an isolated place, away from these people. I never really think of them, looking at them or being affected by them even. It's just my statement about that person. And I remember once Jane and I went to Kensington Palace for dinner with Princess Margaret. And it was a very nice evening, really, but I felt slightly embarrassed as I'd drawn her as a warthog. At that moment, I probably would have tried to explain it away, tried to lessen the pain, tried to lie about it, really, to say that it was not really meant, it's just a joke. But one has to live at a different level. I have to live outside my work, as I say. I can't, I like living a civilized life. My wife points out that when I go to a party or to a dinner anywhere, I do pass comments about the people there as to the way they looked like this or they behaved like that, which she doesn't.
What good is sitting alone in your room? Come hear the music play. Life is a cabaret, oh chum.
Strange enough, they're the overtly sexual drawings I worry about my children seeing. Those of violence, extreme violence, I don't worry about so much. But it's just because, I suppose, I'm a prude of some sort, that I worry about the sexual side of my drawings being seen. I could be shocked by sexuality in some forms, and yet I draw it in all forms. I think it's really just the social rules that have been impressed on me during my childhood that make me feel that it's wrong. I don't mind having the thoughts myself. It's just letting everybody else know that I have those thoughts. What I draw in my drawings, I would not go out and do in Harrods.
Very careful. Get the gun. Get the gun. Get the gun.
I want the American people, I want you to know beyond the shadow of a doubt that during my term as president, justice will be pursued fairly, fully, and impartially, no matter who is involved. This office is a sacred trust, and I am determined to be worthy of that trust.
My friend, I'll say it clear, I'll state my case, of which I'm certain.
Well, I have to admit, I was obsessed by Nixon. I didn't like him. But when he met his end in Watergate, I published this lament in the Sunday Times. Though Nixon makes me sick, I'll miss his every trick. His used car style and sweaty smile made him a perfect. Expletive deleted. Just got it in.
Richard Nixon was running for president. Not many thought he'd make it. Time magazine asked me to do a cover of him, but he refused to let me come and draw him. Time was furious. No one told them what to do, let alone who would complete their covers. We'll send you on his campaign plane as a reporter. He can't stop that, they said. So, feeling rather embarrassed, I traveled with Nixon through North Dakota, Montana, and Nevada. Everywhere we stopped, I would be in the front row drawing the expletive deleted. He was embarrassed too. Eventually he thought, if you can't beat them, join them. So he'd throw me a sweaty smile. Hi, Jerry. Are your pencils sharp today? Ha ha. This is Nixon and Lieutenant Calley, done in 1971. It was one of the many Nixons I did for the Sunday Times in the days when Harry Evans was editor.
We weren't a party political newspaper. We were trying to find an independence of view and a moral position which occasionally could express itself in the current politics of the day, what we got from you was a completely unpredictable moral statement which didn't recognize any party lines. I could never tell which way you were going to go. And it was marvelous because that kind of shaped our own feelings towards things. There are occasions in newspapers when you want to just scream. All you would like to publish is a loud scream. But you can't emit a loud scream. You can write as strongly as you can. But even then, it's still not giving vent to what needs to be said. So I think the value of somebody as outrageous, offensive, and occasionally brutally shocking as you are, is that it reaches parts of the conscience that other pieces of journalism don't.
But the sad thing is I don't think any of these things change the course of history one iota.
Don't you?
Do you?
Oh, yes, I do. I can see your drawing of Ronald Reagan. I can see it of Margaret Thatcher. I can recall to mind in a way which I once thought was peculiar to photography, but you also have it. Your drawing of Enoch Powell at a time of racial tension in Britain.
But that wouldn't have any effect on Enoch Powell. He wouldn't alter his policies.
Of course he wouldn't, but you have an effect on how people perceive him. It's an effect on the moral environment. But I don't think you should ever worry about having an effect.
Well, I can only think that I'm a rallying point. People might say, yes, well, that's what I was thinking or didn't know how to say. And that there is a climate of opinion, you say, created by that.
And I think
I think really, ultimately, it's just for me to get my rocks off onto the paper. It's a kind of selfish thing.
That's right, but I think you must pursue that vision. And although people like me and other editors are useful, you must in the end pursue your own impulse and drive and genius, really. You push caricature to the extreme, and nobody can do with the human face or what you do. Once you've seen a Gerald Scarfe drawing of somebody, it's hard to think of them any other way.
Tetty's petulant lips. These drawings were okay as far as they went, but they were flat. I had to imagine the volume. And what I wanted to do was to bring them off the paper. Mrs. Thatcher, Enoch Powell, Teddy Kennedy. Oh, Ronnie Reagan. He doesn't look too well, does he? His body's gone away to be reconstituted. Let's see who's in this bag. Oh, it's old Charlie, an early edition of old Charlie when he was a young man, but you can see, look, the biscuit beetle have been having a go at him. All these are made out of paper mache, which is flour and water mixed together. The biscuit beetle loves it. And also, so do the mice, because I can see that the mice have been having a go at Enoch here, tearing him to little tiny bits. So it made me want really to go into more durable materials, and I built Chairman Mao here. I had an old chair in the basement, and I couldn't think what to do, so I built this very expensive pun, Chairman Mao. Get it? Standing on the tomb of the unemployed, the fiberglass lady, built to last, I'm sorry to say. Not sure I can say the same for Ronnie Reagan. Here he is as Mickey Mouse. What's wrong with having an aging film star controlling our destiny? My delusions of grandeur reach Brobdingnagian proportions with this scrap metal Gulliver.
classroom. Teacher, leave them kids alone.
Sometimes I just love spending all day, maybe with just the radio, just working on a project, an idea, on my own. But it is a very lonely pursuit, being an artist. So I've always thought that collaborations would be the answer, that it would be wonderful. I used to read about Picasso and Stravinsky and how they got together on various theatrical projects. I used to drive down to Pinewood like this every day. I always wanted to make a movie. It sounded to me like the most wonderful thing to do, reach all those people, work in a big movie studio, have my ideas writ large all over the screen. And I went here every day, where I had a studio of about 40 people who were beavering away doing my drawings. And the whole experience, I suppose, was quite miserable.
When I designed the wall, I created this creature here called Pink. He represents the vulnerable side of us all, the side that we must all take care of.
With whom I worked has very much the same kind of cynical view of life that I have, and he deals entirely with music and words, and I deal entirely with pictures, so we didn't in any way cross one another up. But the collaboration that we had with Alan Parker on the wall wasn't happy, because Alan Parker is used to having complete control. He wasn't very good at dealing with me having my oar stuck in and Roger having his oar stuck in. So the three of us were like three megalomaniacs shut in a room together, each one trying to sort of get one's point over before the other one did. And the whole film rose to a point of hysteria, I think, because of that.
Well, some of it was good and some of it was very painful, wasn't it?
Yeah. And why was that, do you think? Why was it so painful? I never quite understood why it had to be like that.
Why was it painful? I think that neither of us were used to the film industry and the way it works, and the way that everybody's jockeying for position the whole time, in a way that they're not in rock and roll.
It seems to have a sort of near criminal element in it, who are, were practically killed to get their puerile tripe up there on the screen.
It's different. Say, now, for instance, I'm doing some film music. That's all right. There's a producer and a director, and I am just doing the score. My responsibility finishes there. And I may go and help dub it, but that's my end of it, and I don't. Whereas with the wall, it was completely different. Now, because we were all taking responsibility for it.
Yeah.
And I think that was probably what the mistake was.
I suppose the ideal collaboration is where I'm in charge, where I'm collaborating with myself, or I'm telling other people what to do. I'm saying, put that there, or make this exhibition, or that should go here. I like that, because I don't mind delegating in that way, as long as people do what I say.
Ne te retourne pas. J'ai dit. Dieu nous bénisse.
I once had a premonition as a child when I was playing with my toy theatre that one day I'd be doing all this for real.
Sa curiosité aurais-je donc raconté.
The English National Opera asked me to design the costumes and sets for Orpheus in the Underworld. Hello, I thought, this is rather grand. I was a bit overawed at first, but I soon realized that what they wanted from me was the work that I was known for. So I set to with a relish. I had a wonderful time, dozens of sets, hundreds of costumes, all brightly colored. At last I could make my creations come to life. Wretched actors staggered around the stage under the weight of my wildest delusions. It was great fun, lots of jokes. I still felt at home, though. The opera's about heaven and hell. There were 60 characters in Orpheus, but I had to design about 400 or 500 costumes. And this is one of my favorites, Mars. He's the god of war, and he's a drunken buffoon. So I've given him this giant stature. Up here, this is his face as he imagines himself, a rather handsome face. Whereas underneath, not so handsome, excuse me.
My whole life is about applause, really. I want applause. I want people to like me. I want people to like what I do. In fact, everything since the newspaper work, which we used to get the occasional letter from, I suppose even when I got a letter saying, poor you, you have to live with yourself. I'm disgusted with your drawings and that sort of thing. It was some reaction. I had got a reaction from someone. And my life now has become getting a reaction, perhaps, in some way. I want to, after I'd made my drawings, then I started making sculptures and putting them into exhibitions so that when people moved around the exhibition, I could get a feedback from them. I could see them reacting. Then I put my drawings on the stage and on film, all really to get applause. It's deep down inside me. I'm trying to get applause. I want approval, really. I think I've changed. I think that I'm now able to accommodate other styles of work. For instance, when I did the opera, I tried to make it fun. I didn't try to give it bite and grotesque nastiness. I just tried to make it fun. Within the Sunday Times, I am still trying to have bite. And there's been a very unhappy situation at the Sunday Times for some time now. I know that when Rupert Murdoch took over the Sunday Times, he looked at a drawing I'd made of Ronald Reagan going into San Salvador, out of Vietnam into San Salvador, drawing a parallel between the two situations. He looked at that drawing and said, poor old Ronnie, we've got to get rid of this pinko artist.
The important point is that it should be a good cartoon, not that it fits in with any political line. I mean, we have an editorial line in the paper, which I set, But we have Peter Jenkins writes his own column and says many things that I disagree with, but I'm delighted about that. It's another opinion.
You think it's a healthy sign?
Brian Walden does the same thing. Brian writes a column which I sometimes agree with, sometimes I don't. That's not the point. I mean, the view of the paper is expressed in the editorial policy. Other opinions are expressed in the various columns and opinion pieces that we carry, and the cartoon fits into that.
Yes. I mean, I sometimes feel it's uncomfortable because you have the leader which says one thing, and right next to it you have my cartoon which says perhaps the opposite.
Well, I think it would be uncomfortable if every week there was a permanent minority opinion expressed in the cartoon. But that's one matter. That's a different matter from the cartoon not necessarily having to follow the editorial line.
Yes.
And it doesn't.
That's right.
And sometimes I say to you, I don't agree with the political point you're making, but it's a very good cartoon. In fact, that happened only a couple of weeks ago.
The Tebbit cartoon, yes.
Yes, the
yes.
Tebbit one, because I thought you had given the impression that Tebbit was trying to censor the BBC in the cartoon. And I said, I don't agree with the point you're making, but it's a good cartoon. I think it's very funny the way you've got the BBC as the little dog and Tebbit as his master's voice coming out of the megaphone. And so we ran it.
I could be a thorn in the flesh, that's all I mean. And
Yeah,
I
but,
am.
Almost everybody's a thorn in the flesh in this job. And you get used to that.
I still do the political work at the Sunday Times because I still hope to have some effect on politicians, although I say I don't think I do. It's partly habit, partly making a living, and partly it is somewhere where I can voice my opinion every week, and that doesn't come easily, really. To have the freedom to say what you want to say every week is something that I value. I've done several caricatures of myself, and I don't think that I'm nicer to myself. When you're drawing, that pen line, as it goes down, has to follow every little bit of bone and tissue and every hair, and somehow try and put behind the eyes what's going on behind the eyes and what's going on inside the head. It's all a process of exploration, just like this film is meant to be a process of exploration. It can only be like a caricature if it rings true, if it looks right, if it feels right. I mean, I'm known for exposing other people's problems, weaknesses, morals. I'm a bit like a judge myself. I'm a judge, but I'm perhaps standing in judgment of myself ultimately anyway.
Guilty.